risk, all reward. Kamala Harris doing an interview on Fox with Bret Baier tomorrow night pushes all the fascist buttons, all at once, all on Trump. And she especially pushes the one button that proves that...
Would you like me to give the direct quote?
Yeah.
Please excuse my language. This is a direct quote, but Chrissy Teigen referred to Donald Trump as a pussy-ass bitch.
Harris goes on FNC. Trump is again a P.A.B. Thank you, MVP. Can you imagine Trump sitting down to be interviewed by Maddow, or for God's sakes, even Andrea Mitchell, or the Meidas Network guys, or me? This is perfect. First of all, it will enrage Trump not just now, not just tomorrow, but for the rest of the campaign. Every moment. He cannot stop it. He cannot stop his own insanity. He cannot hope to contain it. There is an excellent chance it will literally push him fully over the edge, and he will start dropping N-words or speaking in a language of his own invention. I mean, entirely of his own invention, not the 30 to 35% unintelligible gibberish he speaks now. Trump only found out about this in late afternoon yesterday, and he promptly lost it. He attacked Fox as weak and soft. He called Bret Baier fair and balanced and meant it as an insult, on top of which Trump had already been raging about Fox letting liberals on its network. Think of it, he wrote. I spend an hour with the wonderful Maria Bartiromo, do a beautiful job, and then am followed up all day long by one-sided negative Democrats, including Ian Sams, who virtually owns the network, unquote. You don't know who Ian Sams is, do you? Well, you know who he is now. He's senior advisor to the Harris campaign and often the spokesperson, and he enrages Trump. On top of which, Trump had, in the wee hours of Monday morning at 1:12 a.m. on Columbus Day, he had attacked the vice president for not doing interviews and not doing them well. I believe it is very important that Kamala Harris pass a test on cognitive stamina and agility. Her actions have led many to believe that there could be something very wrong with her. Even 60 Minutes and CBS, in order to protect Lion Kamala, illegally and unscrupulously replaced an answer she had given, which was totally bonkers, with another answer that had nothing to do with the question asked. Also, she is slow and lethargic in answering even the easiest of questions. I know. Every Trump accusation is a confession. Slow and lethargic, you say, Sonny? And the tell is always the same. It's usually everybody knows, but the secondary tell, when he needs something a little darker and more mysterious and certainly more formal, is have led many to believe. Her actions have led many to believe. Well, there it is. Trump is so messing his pants that no diaper can save him now. And now there is a chance that even the Washington Post and New York Times political reporters will skip whatever D.C. cocktail party they were going to on Wednesday night in hopes of getting into Politico's spotted column and start asking the Trump mouthpieces and the Republicans why, if she can go on Fox, he can't go on MSNBC or the Washington Post Live or to a New York Times cocktail party with Joe and AG. This also, I think, finally puts a stake through the she's not doing interviews canard. It's getting to be almost annoying. She's doing too many interviews. In any event, it transforms that entire issue into a journalistic bidding war. No, there has been no sit down with the Post or the New York Times editorial board or live with one of the Sunday shows. But she's going on Fox? One presumes editor Kahn and publisher Sulzberger of the Times are just now being resuscitated after an attack of the Vapors. The approach to Vice President Harris now has to change from bullying her, which is what the media has been doing since the moment she became the nominee, to making the best offer and pleading. Whatever that is to the Harris campaign is almost irrelevant. She just accepted an interview on Fixed News. How demanding could she possibly be? Ironically, there is a glimmer of sanity in the Trump response to this news. He writes that the vice president, quote, has wisely chosen Bret Baier. He's right. I'm not going to say that again. I know this man. Like all of them, Bret Baier does not do his pretend newscast every night just for the money, not even just for the renown. He has a political agenda, and the discovery in Fox's disastrous $787 million Dominion case, in which for reasons of ratings and fascist whoring, Bret Baier insisted that after Fox called Arizona for Biden, he demanded in a never-denied email that it be rescinded. It's hurting us. The sooner we pull it, even if it gives us a major egg, and we put it back in Trump's column, the better we are, in my opinion. In other words, Baier wasn't just a contaminated ex-journalist on election night. He was a conspiracy theorist who just knew Trump couldn't have lost Arizona and that Fox needed to put the state back in Trump's column, even though it had never been in Trump's column, no matter how many egg it produced. But as I say, I know this man. We have had conversations. He thinks he's Walter Cronkite. Offered a broadcast network nightly newscast, if there still are any. I didn't watch last night. He would leave Fox so fast that his three-piece suit would still be standing there on the Fox set in D.C. while he was getting into a cab naked. He thinks he's Walter Cronkite. He thinks he was viewed as Walter Cronkite, and then this email came out, and now fewer people think he's Walter Cronkite, and interviewing the Democratic presidential candidate 20 days before the election will make more people think he's Walter Cronkite. No, by the way, the person Bret Baier most wants to think Bret Baier is Walter Cronkite is Bret Baier. He's not going to softball her, and he may QAnon her. But here's the other thing. He has spent 25 years at Fox and 15 years anchoring what the Foxies think is the evening news, and he wants to be seen as more presidential than Kamala Harris. He's Walter Cronkite, after all. He wants to be seen as fair, even if he doesn't know how to be fair. Plus, 25 years at Fox. Like being locked in a cave. Robinson Crusoe got home faster. How many times in 25 years do you think Bret Baier has interviewed anybody, let alone a presidential candidate, from the other party who did not defer to him, or at least to his network, or pulled punches? I mean, it's one thing to juggle chainsaws. Live TV every night for years is juggling chainsaws. It's quite another thing to juggle chainsaws while they are on fire and somebody is trying to prevent you from catching them. And if you're wondering if Baier might trip up Harris, worry more about Harris tripping up Baier. Madam Vice President, if I may, ask him some questions. What's he going to do, stop the interview? Ask him where Fox is about covering the guys who joined Lara Trump's boat parade while flying Trump flags and Nazi flags with swastikas on them. Ask him where Fox is covering Trump's obvious mental decline and whether he's had a stroke or he has a tumor. Ask him where Fox is about Trump saying the military should be deployed against his enemies and that the military should be deployed at the election 3 weeks from now. Ask him where Fox is covering Trump's promise to invoke the law that would let him imprison or expel all Hispanics in this country based only on their race, or imprison and expel all African Americans, or imprison and expel all German Irish Americans named Baier. Come on, have a little fun on behalf of the rest of us. Literally, poke the bear. There's something else in play here, too. In fascist world, that Harris agreed to go on Fox just does not compute. Spontaneous combustion, the theory of human spontaneous combustion, I'm betting by tomorrow we hear 378 incidents of it nationwide. All of them MAGA. The Jesse Waters and the Gut Gregfelds of this world cannot process this. They have to sell Fox, no Fox and they have no careers. I mean, all the food carts around Fox headquarters on 6th Avenue, all those are already taken. There's nothing for Gutfeld or Waters to do. But can they promote this interview? Can they mock her without mocking Bret Baier and the fabric of the network? Can they insult her without hurting the ratings? These idiots believe in dictatorship and in Trump, but not if it's going to cost them their car service. Trust me. MSNBC is full of these people, too. They have to be on TV. It has yet to be recognized officially, but it is still an addiction. And as to their audience, another win for Kamala Harris. They either know the vice president is smart and quick, or they believe the world has been fixed to make her look smart and quick. Fixed. All of it's fixed, including the weather being controlled, but only by the Democrats. The conspiracy theories were in full blossom yesterday, long before Trump so belatedly responded to the news. They'll give her the questions. She'll write the questions. There won't be any questions. It's a body double. No, it's a double of a body double. And Bret Baier, that's not Bret Baier. That's also a body double. It's a double body double. The likeliest outcome, of course, is that the fact of the interview will continue to exceed anything said in the interview. She went on Fox? Wow. Which is fine. That still makes it a win-win. Win-win. Win-win-win. Win-win-win-win-win. And every minute leading up to it, and every minute for days and maybe weeks after it, will send us all back to February 8th, 2023, a date which will live in infamy if you're Trump. That was the day Congressman Maxwell Frost blew up the Jamie Comer Twitter Censors Conservatives hearing starring Matt freaking Taibbi by making the unfortunate former Twitter content moderation team member Anika Collier-Nabaroli confirm that within minutes of it being posted, Trump's White House demanded that Twitter take down a Chrissy Teigen tweet. Which Chrissy Teigen tweet was that again?
Chrissy Teigen referred to Donald Trump as a pussy-ass bitch.
Wussy-ass glitch. Trump also might be having some ground game problems. Hugo Lowell from The Guardian reports the campaign Sidekick app, which is apparently what Trump ground game people are using, forces canvassers who have slow internet to use, quote, offline walk books, which have no geo-tracking feature. As a result, the Trump campaign and America PAC have little way to know whether canvassers are actually knocking on doors or cheating. Right-wingers trying to get away with not doing work and claiming they did? That's impossible. And a slightly bigger problem, if you missed it, George Conway has now posted the link to sign up to be admitted to Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden here in Fun City a week from next Sunday. It would be a shame if all 20,000 reservations were filled up by people who were then mysteriously and unanimously, unavoidably detained and couldn't go. And they had 500 people in the garden. When 500 people in the garden looks like the raisins in rice pudding at a cheap diner. More importantly, the New York Times notes there is a reason Trump is going to be in the James Dolan German-American Bund 1939 Nazi Hitler Rally Memorial Garden a week and 2 days before the election, when New York is not in play. No matter how often he says it, New York is not in play. Nuremberg stock turns out not to just be for you unwashed civilians. There is a Trump fundraiser within the Madison Square Nazi Garden rally, like special seats and potential access to his sharpness himself. And I mean, if you have to spend the day in a non-competitive state 2 Sundays before the election fundraising guess what? You're losing. Plus, these price points. Holy guacamole! $5,000 for the President's Club experience. So-called because you get clubbed by the ex-president. $35,000 for the MAGA 24 experience. You can talk economic anxieties with 23 other MAGAs, and you can all tell each other that they are the fault of the brown people. $50,000 or raising $70,000 for the Club 47 experience. And this is one I almost feel sorry about for the ones who buy it. Sad to say, that's just a picture with the 47th president at her inauguration. $100,000 per ticket, or twice that raised, $200,000 for Team America First experience. Team America, World Police, F yeah! Free humping marionettes for the kids. $250,000 or twice that raised for Team Trump 2024 experience. And remember, Team Trump 2020 experience was the one Mike Pence bought. And lastly, $924,600 for the Ultra MAGA experience, which lets you stand so close to Trump that you can actually see how badly the Fuhrer has put his makeup on. Also of interest here, so maybe you know the names of the National Football League teams in Pennsylvania, and maybe you don't. Maybe you know the Pittsburgh Steelers play in Pittsburgh and the Philadelphia Eagles play in Philadelphia. See how this works? But if you're the Republican nominee for the Senate in Pennsylvania, shouldn't you check? Shouldn't you be able to keep those two teams straight? Shouldn't you be able to tell which is which? Shouldn't you make sure there's never any doubt that you can tell which team is which? Photos show the Eagles. Your text goes here, and it's about the Steelers. Oops. That's next on this big show. I'm sorry. Flashback. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this edition of Countdown, while there is still a chance that there will be another Subway Series, another World Series of baseball between the New York Mets and the New York Yankees. Even though America collectively yawned at the last one 24 years ago when the World Series was still a thing, while there's still a chance, I'm going to tell the story now of my role at the perimeters of the most famous event of that last Subway Series, the night Roger Clemens of the Yankees threw the razor-sharp end of Mike Piazza's broken bat at Piazza in an attempt to kill him. That's if you're a Mets fan. Or he did no such thing and simply mistook that piece of shattered bat for a baseball and was getting it out of the way, if you're a Yankee fan. Or if, like me, you were in the dugout and Clemens actually more or less threw the bat straight at you. And then Piazza threatened to sue you over the bat. That's just the beginning. Coming up, the details in more things I promised not to tell. First, there are still more new idiots to talk about. The daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. It's my impression of the PA announcer at Yankee Stadium. Get out of the way. The bronze, the British NHS, the National Health Service. There are bad ideas that can be explained, and bad ideas that can be finessed, and bad ideas that can be taken back to the drawing board and tried again. And then there are the bad ideas that are so bad that you have to stop them immediately, call a gigantic news conference, publicly shame and fire everybody connected to them, and then stage a ceremonial bonfire in which you destroy all the evidence that your bad idea ever happened. This is one of the latter ones. King's College Hospital in Lambeth, in London, has given a contract to rent patients wheelchairs. You heard me. They are renting wheelchairs to patients at the hospital. If you come in an ambulance, you can use one of the hospital's wheelchairs. That's okay. But if you stagger in on your own, like after getting stabbed or shot or run over or, I don't know, too much sardonic British humor caused you to collapse, or your neighbors drag you in and leave you there and you can't walk, they will not put you in a wheelchair. You get pointed to what looks like a bike rack from, say, City Bike in New York or Bay Wheels in San Francisco, or the luggage cart rental outfits at airports, only for wheelchairs. You have to have a credit card to unlock a wheelchair, or guess what? You're crawling. First 4 hours of your wheelchair are free, but they do have your credit card number, after which it's £2 per hour. Since after a 14-year run of fascist rule in England, waiting times at the NHS at King's College are up to 12 hours, you are probably paying £32 for a wheelchair. Or you're hijacking a gurney or something. Or buying one used on the street for £30. The company involved in this, Wheelshare, if you're looking for them, it's WHEELSHARE, and the hospital and the NHS have come up with the perfect solution to the understandably bad publicity here. Wheelshare is letting it be known that it will soon be adding value to its pay or crawl service. It will soon be covering its rent-a-chairs with corporate advertisements and logos, available at popular prices. As I said, fire everybody in public, refund every charge, and burn all of it. The runner-up worser, hockey's Ottawa Senators, who let down an entire nation yesterday. Well, they only have partial responsibility for this. It's a dock strike in Nova Scotia that's part of it. But Ottawa, who told you to have your things shipped in from some foreign country rather than have them made in Canada? Yesterday was Canadian Thanksgiving because our Thanksgiving is Canadian 4th of July or something. I don't know. I can't keep it straight. And the Senators, who had the lone matinee on the national holiday, had promised their fans who went to their game a natural and lovely celebration of the true meaning of Thanksgiving, a gravy boat. A gravy boat that looks like the Ottawa Senators' Zamboni ice cleaning machine. You got the picture in your mind? Like a Zamboni machine, a little Zamboni machine, only with a little tiny handle, a little circular thing you could hold with your fingers, and it's full of gravy? How Canadian. But the Senators missed the goddamned boat. Apparently, this is a thing. It turns out NHL teams have been giving out gravy boats that look like Zamboni ice cleaning machines since at least 2018 when Chicago did it. There are also ones from Nashville, from Detroit, Anaheim, LA, Washington, but apparently this was going to be the first ever Canadian Zamboni gravy boat. 10,000 Ottawa Senators gravy boats are still in Halifax, sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the promotional opportunities roll away. And this promotional opportunity ran aground, as it were, due to labor troubles, and that's labor with a U. Call me Ishmael, my boat sank. The gravy boats didn't get there, the end. The Senators say if they arrive in time, they'll give them out for Christmas. But of course, anything that soon would be gravy. Fans at yesterday's game got, instead of the gravy boat, a voucher for a Coke and some popcorn, which bluntly is not the same goddamn thing. I mean, how am I supposed to use a Coke and some popcorn to pour my gravy on top after I put the biscuit in the basket? But the winner, worst, also kind of sports-ish, Dave McCormick, the Connecticut guy, who is somehow the Republican candidate for the Senate in Pennsylvania, probably because their last candidate for Senate in Pennsylvania was Dr. Oz, who lost over the issue of the crudité vegetable plate and lost to the guy from the Twilight Zone episode Who's Here to Serve Man. Like every candidate ever, McCormick has made a pitch for sports fans in his state. Well, the state he's running in, it's not his state, and it did not go well. Let me preface this. In case you don't know, the state of Pennsylvania has two National Football League teams, the Philadelphia Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Philadelphia Eagles play in Philadelphia. The Pittsburgh Steelers play right in Pittsburgh. And that's all you really need to know. I mean, maybe it's important that the Pittsburgh Steelers used to be the Pittsburgh Football Pirates, but not really. This is what David McCormick posted. 4 photos of him at a tailgate. You know, the real purpose of football, to go out and get drunk before the game in the parking lot. And it's McCormick with a bunch of people in Eagles green T-shirts and Eagles dark green uniforms, and they're men and they're women, and there's him waving and him wearing a MAGA cat. Well, I meant MAGA cap, but it could be he's wearing a MAGA cat. These guys would wear dead cats on their heads, wouldn't they? Anyway, pictures of him with Eagles fans, smiling and being an Eagles fan. And he's wearing an Eagles fleece of some sort. And it says, "Fun tailgate in Philly today." Football emoji. Excited to watch the Steelers throttle the Raiders. Yeah, that's the Philadelphia Eagles. The Steelers play in Pittsburgh. I just told you this. You said you understood, McCormick. Now, this is as stupid as it sounds, but perhaps not for the reasons that first come to mind. It is possible that this latest idiot fascist, McCormick, thinks he was at a Philadelphia Steelers game. It's possible. I don't know. He later finessed this to suggest he was going to go tailgate with the Eagles fans and then go watch the Steelers on TV in their game at Las Vegas. The timing of his tweet actually supports this. He tweeted those photos and the reference to the wrong team at 4:36 p.m. Eastern. The Eagles had played at 1 p.m. in Philadelphia, and the Steelers were playing in Nevada at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. But the point is, even if you aren't such a carpetbagger who isn't actually from Pennsylvania, that you think that the Pittsburgh team is the same as the Philadelphia team, and it's all sports ball, why would you be so stupid as to post a bunch of pictures with Eagles fans and not mention the Eagles, but only the Steelers? I mean, among other things, Eagles fans hate Steelers fans. Even if you're not a moron, you look like a moron. Republican Pennsylvania Senate candidate from Connecticut, David. By the way, for next time, the Steelers and Eagles merged during World War II, and they spent the 1943 season as the Steagles. So whatever you do, don't call either one of the teams the Steagles. And there used to be NFL teams in the Frankfurt section of Philly, and there was another one in Pottstown, PA, and the bankrupt 1952 Dallas Texans eventually moved their base of operations to Hershey, Pennsylvania. So don't mention any of them, please. How about this? How about when you're unfamiliar with a state, as you are with Pennsylvania, next time you run in the damn state in which you actually live? McCormick, today's worst person in the world! It started on the night of October 22nd, 2000, and it ended, well, I'll let you know if and when it ever ends. I was enjoying the second night of one of my childhood dreams come true. I was the host, not just of the telecast of the World Series, but it was an all New York City series, a Mets versus Yankees series, a Subway series. I'd literally dreamt of it since 1967. The manager of the Yankees had been the first person I ever interviewed on TV. 15 years earlier, I had worked with him in TV. He was a friend of mine. I had just covered the Mets through their playoff run and knew all of their players. My face had been on an advertisement in dead center field in the Mets stadium for the entirety of the year before, and the players all knew me by name. Where we were that night, Yankee Stadium, was not only where I saw my first baseball game, but was about 7/8 of a mile from the hospital in which I had been born. And my first home was 4 subway stops away. The night before this event, as I hosted the start of the first game of this Keith-a-Palooza, I was supposed to introduce the public address announcer of Yankee Stadium, Bob Shepard, whose voice I had heard nearly every day since I was 8 years old. So he could then introduce the players and this epic World Series would begin, and it dawned on me in the seconds before I was supposed to do this that I literally had the power to stop the 2000 World Series from ever happening. If I just kept talking and never actually said, "Here is Bob Shepard," well, I could delay it briefly until they cut my mic off and then fired me on the spot. Anyway, this was game 2. And now that our pregame show was over and I had waved to my mother, who had seen her first game at Yankee Stadium just, 66 years previously, and she was seated in the family seats that were just 9 rows up from our on-field set, I had crawled into the position I would assume for the entire game as the dugout reporter. I was hunched over on a stool, squeezed between the far end of the Yankee dugout and our Fox Sports first base camera. A thin chicken wire fence separated me from the dugout itself. In fact, it was a formality. I was more or less in the dugout. Players, coaches, and that night as I settled in, my friend the Yankee manager all came over to say hello. Roger Clemens of the Yankees, who I had also known since we were both rookies in Boston sports in 1984. He lasted. I didn't. Roger Clemens had struck out the first 2 Mets hitters. Clemens was a strange man about whom I had heard a strange tale of teammates in a college summer baseball league who were all wearing their wallets in their uniform pants back pockets during a game because one of them explained to a friend of mine, "We have this crazy kid Clemens from Texas on this team and we don't trust him." In Boston, I had found him a little nervous, a little standoffish, but doing his best to be professional. But by now, there were rumors swirling around Roger Clemens about amphetamines and performance-enhancing drugs, and you knew not to talk to him before or after a game unless you had to. And if you had to, you chose your words very carefully and made sure that whatever you did, you had to start with something mundane, like the score of the game. And if you could let him bring up anything controversial or complex, he would then probably do it. So now, as this game continued after 2 batters had struck out, Lee Mazzilli, the former Mets star, now Yankees coach, another friend of mine, was on the other side of a little fence. And as Mets superstar Mike Piazza stepped in as the 3rd batter of the game, Mazzilli leaned in and said conspiratorially, "Let's see if Raj flips him again." In midsummer 2000, Roger Clemens had beamed Mike Piazza with a fastball. There was a hospital visit involved. Nobody was convinced it had not been intentional or that Clemens would not do it again even though it was the World Series. Mazzilli and I leaned forward. Piazza was a deeply complicated guy, too. During the playoffs, he had walked up to me and asked me if it was true I was from New York, and then he quizzed me about the relative merits of the suburbs, and then he wanted to know if I had really taken up residence in his favorite Southern California hotel, and we talked for 15 minutes about that. The next night, I saw him, smiled, said hello, and he looked at me like I had just sworn a vendetta against his family. For a long time, I thought it was me until about 10 years later, the great Vin Scully said that Piazza was with the Dodgers, and when they were both together there in Los Angeles, Vin had had the identical experience with Piazza. Best friends on the team bus one day, and then no indication Piazza remembered even meeting him the next. I mean, that was Vin Scully. Clemens, as it turned out, did not throw a baseball at Piazza, but instead pitched him inside, in on his hands. And Piazza tried to stop a swing that was half self-defense, but instead, the odd angle and the force of the pitch shattered Piazza's bat. The ball veered to the right, describing a circle into foul territory. The head of the bat shot out towards Clemens on the mound. A second piece flew briefly into the infield. Piazza was left holding just the handle, and it looked as foolish as that sounds, but lost in this description is the fact that that all happened at once. And even from our side angle in the Yankee dugout, it looked to Mazzilli and me as if Piazza's bat had simply exploded, like it was a trick device of some sort. I saw Clemens reach for the baseball. I thought it was the baseball right in front of him, and then just as quickly, he and I at the same moment realized it was not the baseball, it was the barrel of the bat, which was slightly rounded, just a little darker than a baseball, but could, in the heat of an instant, following a bat explosion, it could be mistaken for a ball. So far, so good. But right then, Clemens, realizing it was part of a bat and not a ball, promptly threw that part of the bat at me. Jesus, Maz, I said to Mazzilli, why did Clemens throw that bat barrel at me? The Yankee coach looked incredulously at me. He didn't throw it at you, he threw it at me. That's what it looked like. We were lined up perfectly. If Roger Clemens had thrown the barrel of Mike Piazza's bat, say 120 feet, instead of just 6 or 7 feet, he would have hit either me or Lee Mazzilli in the Yankee dugout. As it was, since nobody knew exactly what was happening, Piazza had started to run down to first base in case the ball was fair. He didn't know where the ball was either. For that initial split second, you really couldn't tell which flying object was the ball, and also whether the ball was fair or foul. So Roger Clemens's throw certainly looked like it was aimed at Piazza as Piazza went down the first baseline, and as Piazza took umbrage, and there was another split second of confusion when it looked like Piazza might charge out to the mound to try to sock Clemens for this and for the midsummer beating. I said to Mazzilli, wait, did he throw that bat at Piazza? Mazzilli just shook his head. I don't think so. Who in the hell knows? He's been here 2 years. I haven't figured out anything he's done so far. As the umpires then got involved, Clemens repeatedly tapped his own chest, and not in a bragging way, but in a kind of what looked like, that's on me way. 2 bat boys collected the 3 main pieces of the bat and a bunch of smaller shards, some of them smaller than a toothpick. The Fox play-by-play man threw it to me in the dugout. Well, I said, I can tell you the Yankee dugout doesn't know what happened or why, Joe. Mazzilli laughed quietly and then hit me in the arm while I was on the air. I postulated that Clemens was looking for a ball hit back to him, instead found the piece of the bat, and then discarded that piece of the bat so he could keep looking for the ball. That he discarded it kind of where Piazza was running might have been deliberate, might have been a coincidence. I do remember suggesting that if Clemens had really aimed the bat at Piazza, that from that distance, with the strength and accuracy of a major league pitcher, he clearly would have hit him with it. Piazza then promptly grounded out to end the inning, and as Clemens came back towards the Yankee dugout where Mazzilli and I were, he again stopped to talk to the umpire, who's Charlie Relaford. Over the noise of 56,000 fans at Yankee Stadium, I couldn't hear a damn thing. But it sure looked like Clemens was again saying, that was on me. I asked Mazzilli if he could find out if that's what Clemens was doing, and half an inning later, Mazzilli reported that Clemens indeed thought for a second it was the ball, and that he threw it, and that it was on him, and that it was not intentional, and it was not directed at Piazza. Now I did something kind of stupid. I suggested to my bosses that I should go ask the commissioner of baseball, who in a World Series game had the power to eject any player for any reason, although that power had not actually been used since 1934, what he thought of all this. The producer said yes, and I thought, me and my big mouth. I now had to crawl out of that little space between camera and dugout, and I mean literally, crawl, hands and knees, to exit back into the seats via where the groundskeepers kept all the extra dirt. I knew where in the stands the commissioner was sitting. I went there. I got to him. I asked him. He assured me there was no discipline coming for Clemens, and they'd look at the tape of the game again that night or in the morning, but he really didn't think Clemens had tried to hit Piazza with the bat. Well, they would look at the tape, and they decided both that Clemens did not try to hit Piazza with the bat and that he should be fined $50,000 for, I don't know, not trying to hit him with the bat. So I made it back to the dugout, reversing my crawl like I was recreating the movie The Great Escape. As it turned out, Piazza's little squib shot that caused all the trouble with the exploding bat was about the hardest thing they hit off Clemens all night. Over 8 innings, he struck out 9 Mets batters. He walked none. He gave up only 2 hits, and he only hit 1 batter. And then, incredibly, after Clemens left the game, the Yankees almost blew a 6-0 lead in the 9th inning. A Met outfielder named Jay Payton hit a 3-run homer off future Hall of Famer Mariano Rivera, and the Mets had a chance to tie the game or go ahead off Rivera in the top of the 9th, and then he got out of it, and the final score was 6-5 Yankees. And with the game over, now it was Keith interviews Clemens time. I went to the prearranged spot at the other end of the Yankee dugout, where another friend of mine, the Yankees PR director, had guaranteed me he would go and get Clemens, and they would emerge after Clemens left the clubhouse to do what was a contractually obligated interview with Fox and me. Apparently, Roger Clemens started making his way towards me the moment the Yankees finally won that game. Unfortunately, at that exact moment, security closed the only runway from the Yankee dugout to the clubhouse so that a dignitary could use it as an exit from his seats. The dignitary was Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, noted front-running Yankees fan and ticket freeloader. And while Fox literally delayed the start of every newscast on every one of its stations in the country, even on the West Coast, and Joe Buck and Tim McCarver kept showing replays again and again and promising my interview with Roger Clemens, Rudy Giuliani took his goddamn time leaving the field. His idiot son Andrew grabbed some dirt from the field. I half expected him to eat it. Instead, he stuffed it in his jacket pockets. Giuliani now waited for his entire entourage, one of his wives, some of his, I guess they were friends, assorted political riffraff. And as my producers screamed in my ear, "Where is Clemens?" Giuliani waited until they were all together on the field, and finally he marched them down into the dugout and up through the runway. And after all this delay, Clemens came out, and finally I could ask him about throwing the bat shard at or near Piazza. And at that moment, I remembered what I had learned about Clemens in Boston. If you started an interview with something controversial, he might very well walk away. If, on the other hand, you did the boring game outcome question, he would answer anything you asked, and he might even bring up anything controversial himself. But you had to do the stupid game stuff first. So, which was harder work, Roger? I asked. 8 innings of 2-hit ball or watching the Mets nearly tie it in the 9th? His answer was not bad, but he did not bring up the bat. So I asked another question about what he thought of his performance in that game. Well, that did it. He started talking about having to overcome his emotions in the first inning. And now I could say, well, since you brought up the emotions, the bat throwing incident, did you throw that piece of broken bat at Mike Piazza? There is a freeze frame from that interview in which Roger Clemens' eyes are bugged wide open. Well, Clemens basically confirmed what the guys in the dugout had told me he had told them. You can believe him or not, but he thought the thing he grabbed was the ball. And when it wasn't, he threw it away just in case the ball was somewhere else near him and he had to have a free hand with which to pick it up. He explained the chest taps he was indeed saying to the umpire Charlie, as Clemens called him, accompanying his apologies to the umps for throwing the bat. He said he didn't even know where Piazza was at the point he threw the bat. It was as straight and nonpartisan and, frankly, as informative an interview as I've ever conducted. Meanwhile, everybody else in that stadium, everybody else in that city, everybody else in the tri-state area was convinced of one of only 2 things. Roger Clemens had tried to impale Mike Piazza with a shard of his own bat, or the Mets were crybabies who could not tell that Clemens obviously did not try to impale Mike Piazza with his own bat. There was no middle ground. I found this out specifically the next day when the TV sports columnist of the New York Times, Rich Sandomir, who was a friend of mine, called to interview me about the interview. Why didn't you ask him about the bat first? Nobody cared about how he pitched. He threw a bat at Piazza. I said, "You're a Met fan." And I explained the theory of not making Clemens end an interview before he said what you needed to know. I went through the whole thing I just recited here. It was amazing to see those few days how every sports reporter and columnist in New York self-identified as either a Met fan or ex-Met fan or a Yankee fan or ex-Yankee fan. And you can still see it today as this story from 22 years ago is recollected by others. They wrote what they felt as kids. Clemens was the victim, or Clemens tried to kill Mike Piazza like he was a Dracula and they had the wooden stake to go through his heart. Meanwhile, we learned recently from Joe Torre, the Yankee manager, another one of my friends, that they all hid something from us that night. The thing about emotions. After the incident in the first inning, Roger Clemens went back to the Yankee clubhouse and started to cry. This might have had something to do with embarrassment or grief, but since he had noted that he had to check his emotions, I always thought, well, he might have been a little overamped for that game, naturally or otherwise. All right, so before I present anything else out of chronological order, let me go back to the moment I thanked Roger Clemens for the interview and threw it back to Joe Buck and Tim McCarver in the Fox booth, because this is when the real trouble started. They were pretty much done for the night, but I had another 2 hours to go in a live post-game show on Fox's cable sports network. We had about 4 minutes until that show started, and it suddenly occurred to me that although this was not the most important event in the history of the World Series, the bat would become part of the iconography of baseball. I had been at Yankee Stadium often enough over the years to know the two kids who ran the visiting clubhouse. And right then, they were still packing up the Mets bats and equipment in the Met dugout. So I ran over and asked the senior of them, what happened to the pieces of the Piazza bat? Well, the guy explained that Bobby Valentine, the Mets manager, had asked that one of the pieces go to a friend of his in the stands. And he, the clubhouse attendant, had handed it to the guy. A second piece, he believed, was kept by the Yankees. He wasn't sure about that. The third piece, the handle, was, where was it? Where is it? He asked the other attendant. It's here in the garbage, the kid said. I did a double take. The garbage? Yeah, the kid said, under the dugout bench. And there it was, stuffed in amid all the empty bags of sunflower seeds and the crushed Gatorade cups. I said, what happens to it now? Gets thrown out. They clean out the dugouts first. So I said, look, can I borrow it? This would make a great prop for our postgame show. And the attendant says, sure. And he pulls it out of the pile and hands it to me, just about 7 inches of a baseball bat. And all there is Piazza's uniform number 31 written in magic marker on the bottom. Listen, I said, I won't be able to bring this back to you for like 2 hours. We're on for 2 hours. Will you still be in the clubhouse? And he said, are you kidding? We have to be here at 8. He and I will be out of here in 10 minutes. And I said, you want me to bring it back to you for game 3? And he says, garbage? You're going to bring back garbage? Throw it out, keep it, whatever. What do I care? So I used the bat fragment as a prop in the show repeatedly. And I stuck it in my shoulder bag. And I thought, I'm not a scrounger, but this is a valuable piece of memorabilia, and I'd like to keep it. So I'll auction it off for charity and bid against myself or something, or I'll make a donation to a baseball charity, and I'll keep it. And that was it. And 2 days later, as the World Series shifted from Yankee Stadium to Shea Stadium, I got a phone call from one of the PR guys at Fox Sports. Did you see the paper? And I said, no, not yet. And he says, Piazza told the guy from Newsday that you stole his bat, and he wants it back. And I said, what? If I hadn't asked about it, it would be on a garbage scow right now being towed out to be dumped in the Atlantic Ocean. And he says, maybe, but Piazza told this John Heyman he's going to sue you to get it back. So now I go to the ballpark with extra excitement on my plate. I'm waiting for Mike Piazza to tell me he's going to sue me. So I go out onto the field. I'm wondering how long it's going to be before I run into Piazza. And like 2 minutes after I step on the field, I turn around and he's walking towards me and he looks at me and he says, hey, Keith, wild one the other night, huh? Say, listen, when you lived at Shutters, did you ever eat at Ivy at the Shore in Santa Monica? Nothing about the bat. We're talking about restaurants in Santa Monica, California. And I say, well, yeah, but did you ever eat at Shea J's? And a big smile from Piazza. Oh, man, I love Shea J's. I love Jay. Give me your number this winter when I'm home. Let's go eat at Shea J's. And I said, I'll pay for it, and I'll order the sand dabs. Now we're talking about sand dabs, how to prepare sand dabs at a restaurant. And then he says, hey, sorry, I got to go hit. Have a good show. That was it. He's in the paper threatening to sue me. We see each other on the field. He starts the conversation. No mention of suing me. Not one word. Next day in the paper, more Piazza quotes about how he's going to sue me for stealing his bat. Next night, Game 4 of the World Series. We're just about to go on the air with the pregame show, and now Piazza comes over again, coming in from the outfield to the dugout, and he says, hey, this must be really cool to do what you guys are doing. Have a great show. And by now, the only thing I can think of, he does not know I'm the same Keith Olbermann he keeps threatening to sue. So the World Series ends and the Yankees beat the Mets. And if you look for it, there's this photo of the traditional post-game awarding of the World Series trophy and the Most Valuable Player Award. And it's Commissioner Bud Selig and Derek Jeter of the Yankees and me. And just before it happened, George Steinbrenner was the owner of the Yankees. He's crying and he leans in and I give him a hug and reassure him. And he asks me if my mother went to the game. And I said, you know my mother. She'd never come to Shea Stadium. She hates it more than you do. And he says, I love her more than ever before now. So the series ends, and it's not been that great a series, but it's been exciting, and it was the dream from my childhood. And the Yankees have won, and my friends are happy, and I've not heard another word about this lawsuit. Nothing from Mike Piazza. And I told the Fox people, well, if I'm not going to hear anything more from them, it's easy. I'm going to keep the bat, and I'm going to donate $25,000 to this charity, the Baseball Assistance Team, which helps ex-ball players in financial need because, A, I'm not a scrounger. B, it's a great cause. C, that's actually much more than the bat handle would be worth on the open market. And D, the acronym for the Baseball Assistance Team is BAT, BAT. And that's perfect. It's about Piazza's bat. You get it? And then nothing for a month. Whereupon Fox gets another letter now from Piazza's agent, a fellow named Monzon, and he threatens to sue again, and that's the end of it. Never heard from him again. So now it's the next year, 2001, and I'm back in New York working for CNN, doing the news, and I go to a Mets game, and I see Piazza, and I give him a big smile, and I offer my hand, and I say, still owe you those sand dabs from Shay J, and he just stares at me and walks right past me. And I see a cop I know who works next to the Mets dugout, and the cop says, Mike has been asking him about me. Is that Keith Olbermann, the one who stole my bat? So now, I'm not just keeping the bat. I want to sue Mike Piazza for being a pain in the ass. And then 9/11 happens. And ball players are doing charity things, and sportscasters and newscasters are doing charity things. And I think, well, this is the time. When the baseball season resumes, I throw the bat handle in my bag, and I go out to a Mets game, and I go up to Piazza's locker before the game, and I pull the bat shard out, and I say, take this, Mike. Auction it off for charity. Let's do some good with this. Or if it's too much trouble, you sign it and I'll auction it off. We can leave my name out of it, whatever you want, however you want to do it. And he looks at me like I've just insulted his mother and says, no, it's too complicated. And he turns away, and I think to myself, this is the strangest athlete I have ever met. And just before the season ends, I go to another Mets game. Now, this time it's one of his teammates who takes me aside and says, you know, Piazza never stops talking about you stealing his bat from the Clemens game last year. He says he still wants to sue you. Didn't you try to give him the bat back in the clubhouse to auction off? Didn't I see that? And I say, yeah, I did. And he refused to take it. And the guy laughs and he says, great player, excellent catcher, I love him. Strangest player I have ever met. Comes 2002, nothing happens. See Piazza at several Mets games, nothing happens. 2003, nothing happens. Now, I can't pin the year down on this. It's one of the Red Sox-Yankees playoff series, either 2003 or 2004, and I'm leaving the field as they're clearing the media off just before the game starts. And I'm going out through the Red Sox dugout, literally at the same spot where the kid handed me Piazza's bat handle 3 or 4 years earlier, where the trouble all began. And I see the new owner of the Red Sox team approaching from the other end of the dugout. Keith, John Henry, nice to meet you. Have you got a minute? And I said, well, yeah, they're kicking the media off the field. So, and he laughs and he says, I can take care of that. And he yells at the plainclothes cop and he says, he's with me. And the cop nods. And John Henry, the owner of the Red Sox, and I sit down on the Red Sox bench before the start of a Red Sox-Yankees playoff game. And there are no other reporters out there. And I think, okay, what did I say about the Red Sox? What is he pissed off about? Instead, John Henry says, can I ask you about Mike Piazza? And I laugh and I say, sure, what about him? And he says, you have part of his bat from the World Series with Clemens, right? And I say, yeah. And he says, well, tell me the whole story. So I do, what you've just heard. And John Henry says, that's what I was told. Thank you. Huh, I thought it was me. So that other piece of the bat that was handed to a friend of Bobby Valentine's during that game, that friend is a great friend of mine. And after 9/11, he said, wouldn't it be great to get Mike Piazza to sign this? And then we can auction it off for the victims' families or the cops or some other charity. And he gives me the bat, and I call the Mets, and they approach Mike, and they call me, and they say, Mike loves the idea, and I should come to one of the spring training games, and he'll sign it. So the next March, I go to one of the Mets spring training games, and I go up to him in the clubhouse, and I introduce myself, and he looks at me like I'm from Mars. And I say, well, I brought the bat. And he says, what bat? And I explained that we had arranged to have him sign the bat from the World Series for a 9/11 charity, and he erupts at me. I'm not signing that bat. Sure, for charity. You think I was born yesterday? And now I say something to John Henry, owner of the Red Sox, like, welcome to the club. Did he threaten to sue you too? And he laughs and says, yes, that's the next part of the story. So while we're trying to straighten that out, His agent calls me and asks if I will give them the bat to auction off for charity, and I say sure. And I go to another Mets game, and I go to the clubhouse, and I have the bat again. Now Piazza says, no, I can't take the bat because of pending litigation. But if I want him to, he'll sign it for me. All I have to do is come back a couple of weeks later. So this is what I wanted to ask you, Keith. Is he the strangest ball player you've ever met, or is it just me? There's one more part to this. Flash forward to 2014. I still have the Piazza bat handle, the one I unsuccessfully tried to give back to Piazza. The middle portion, the one John Henry unsuccessfully tried to give back to Piazza, has been sold with the proceeds going to charity. So where is the third piece, the barrel of the bat, the part that Clemens threw at Piazza if you're a Met fan, or was unfairly accused of throwing at Piazza if you're not a Met fan? And the answer finally arrives in a sports memorabilia auction catalog that year. While one of the visiting bat boys was handing the middle part of the bat to a friend of Bobby Valentine and John Henry's in the stands, the barrel, which landed near the Yankee dugout, was scooped up by the Yankee bat boy, who put it in the pile of Yankee broken bats. And as it turned out, right at that point, the Yankees' strength and conditioning coach, Jeff Mangold, who was on the bench, said, "Wait a minute. That's the pile of broken bats they're going to throw out. They shouldn't throw it out. It's history." And he grabs that part of the Piazza bat and puts it up in his home office, and now it's 14 years later, and he wants to auction it off for charity. So he auctions it off, and I think, well, hell, it should be alongside the other piece of the bat, my other piece of the bat, the handle. So I win the auction. And there it is on my wall, complete with a baseball card showing Roger Clemens about to throw the barrel. Reasons left to your imagination. 2/3 of the famous bat. I'll sell it someday, I'm sure, but I'll always have the memories. My memories and John Henry's memories. And if you're wondering, no, unlike John Henry and I, that Yankee strength coach Jeff Mangold never tried to give it back to Piazza or get it signed by Piazza or auction it off for charity with Piazza, which means that on top of everything else, Jeff Mangold is smarter than John Henry and I put together. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. We're now back to 5 episodes a week, posting nightly just after midnight Eastern. Yeah, I still have the bat. Follow me for the podcast promo videos on TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter X, Instagram, and FaceTwit. Once again, there is a Monday countdown, too. Write that down. And please send this edition of the podcast to somebody who does not know that they need to listen, but they need to listen. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of Countdown, arranged, produced, and performed most of our music. Mr. Chanel was on orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums. I'm not sure who did the typewriter. It was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, and it was written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. I mean, the composition is courtesy of ESPN Inc. I don't think Mitch Warren Davis is courtesy of ESPN Inc. Anywho, other music arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Jonathan Banks. Everything else was pretty much my fault. So that's Countdown for today. 3 weeks until the 2024 presidential election and the 1,379th day since convicted felon Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the election. Use the mental health system. Use presidential immunity to keep him from doing it again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow. Bulletins as the news requires. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.